Hello and welcome back to the Panda Award Show. My name's Abhi, and I'm joined with my friend, my co-host, Ben, who's also our special guest for the day. How are you doing today, Ben?
Man, I'm doing good. How about yourself?
You know how it is. It's this podcast episode. If we hit our schedule, we're gonna release it about 2 weeks before my wife gives birth, and I am excited for that. So, for me at least, I'm stressed, happy, excited, nervous, every emotion in the book all at once.
Dude, you're gonna do great. It's gonna be a lot. Change all the diapers that you can. You got this.
I've been told that she doesn't want to do any of those, so I might.
You got this.
The last episode, you got to interview me, and it was cool to talk about myself. But I want to hear more about you. We've known each other for a while, but I want to learn the story of Ben. What's the first thing in your life that just made you think I like computers?
When I think about technology, one of the earlier memories is I got a little bit in trouble because while my dad was at work, I would take apart his computers and put them back together and really just anything. So eventually they would go to yard sales and, get something that was $5 and say, okay, you can take apart that. Just don't take apart the stuff that matters. Just really old desktops and things like that. I killed some stuff too. Like one computer I left open while it was running and I dropped a nickel in it and killed the computer. Somehow it shorted the circuit board.
I've seen that happen. I have anecdotes about that if you ever want to hear them one day. How did that curiosity or that creativity start to shift and morph how did it make your middle school experience or your high school experience?
I think the tinkering kind of carried through anything I could take apart and figure out how it worked. I was really fortunate with the elementary school that I was at. It was pretty good. There was a car plant that had opened in the area. When we moved to our place, there was a stoplight, and that was all that there was in our town. And then a GM plant came in and kind of put us on the map.
Wow,
when I get to middle school, I get shifted to kind of a different area, and they weren't going to serve my house by bus. So I would have had to be drove in. So we ended up going to homeschool at that point, which was interesting. It was a lot of here's the workbooks, go do the work. And then you'd still have standardized testing. And, I did fairly well in those standardized tests and stuff. But, I feel a lot of ways it was pretty isolating. So
what I'm getting out of that though is that you learned how to be a self-starter and able to work in silos. Right?
Yeah, if I was in an interview,
There's
I think that's how I would
out
spin that. Yeah.
There's a positive spin to everything.
Yeah. One cool thing I did is Radio Shack was still a thing, and they had the little starter electronics kit, and I worked through the workbook on the electronics lab.
Cool. That's one thing I loved about my childhood. I think I still have one of my first electronic sets.
Yeah. This one took 4D batteries, and it had a breadboard on it, and
cool.
each chapter was a different project you were doing. It had little LED, or I think they were LEDs, but I don't remember exactly, but you'd kind of map things out. It was pretty cool.
I want to say back then they weren't LEDs.
They probably weren't.
You're homeschooled. You're learning, you're a self-starter. Did you end up wanting to do more things that were curious and you started building your own stuff online, or you started creating things? That's what I hear a lot is if you have to do things, if you're learning that way, you're going to start to be, oh, what else can I learn?
Yeah. So it was one of those things where we had dial-up internet, so I didn't have access to the internet all the time, but when I did, I would look up whatever I could. And one of the things that I did find was, homeschooling's a bit isolating at times. And, so I was kind of cut off from the friend circles that I had before. And I found community in a site or chat room called Habbo Hotel, which you kind of have a little avatar and you make rooms. And I definitely lied on my age to get in there. I think you were supposed to be, 14 or 15. I was in there, but, it gave you a way to communicate with others. And, obviously I was following internet safety. So I think my original identity was I was Chris from California, and I was 16, even though I was 12.
Not in California.
Not in California at all. But the reason I'm I'm tying that in is because one of the aspects they had were called fan sites, and they would have different things. They would there was a trading market on Habbo, which is kind of interesting, and because there was furniture and certain kind of furniture is rarer than others, and they would assign
Yeah, yeah.
values based on the market, and these sites would track the values week by week.
Man, that brings me back to like RuneScape, Neopets,
Yeah,
like the markets we created.
yeah. But
That was pretty cool.
the other thing that these fan sites would do is they would actually have radio stations, and it would use this technology called Shoutcast, and
Yeah,
you
I've
could
heard of that.
you'd have teenage DJs that were like online and stuff. So, they would host like get-togethers in the Habbo like rooms, and then you'd tune into the radio and hear the person. And I actually was a DJ, which is kind of funny to say, but a DJ at like 12 or 13. I hopefully this
Oh,
is
okay.
past the statute of limitations, but I pirated Sam DJ broadcaster and became an internet DJ.
Hopefully, though, you paid for WinRAR. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, about that.
No.
It was a terrible influence at that time.
So you're doing these things online. You're becoming a DJ, and that's pretty cool that you got that kind of experience early age. I think that's one of the reasons that you wanted to start this podcast, and that's something similar in a similar vein. I learned audio production when I was in grade school and
Yeah.
fell in love with it compared to other forms of creativity. But what are some of the skills or tools or things you use then that you feel gained or it made your skill set better that kind of carried you to the next year or 5 years down the line? Like what was the next thing after that?
Yeah. So what kind of started as me DJing for other people, I became really determined to create my own fan site for whatever reason. These were full-fledged websites. These weren't like pre-builts that people were making. There was some Joomla usage. I think it was a little early for WordPress, but Joomla and Drupal were around, I
Yeah.
believe. But so I started figuring out how to build a website. So I went to W3 Schools, and which is kind of a free online resource even today, and I started learning how HTML worked. And to be honest, the way that I
Yep.
started is I kind of took an existing design and I copied it, and then I just started like making it work. Obviously I wasn't making a site from scratch. I had no
Right,
idea what
right.
I was
Yeah.
doing, but I think,
Yeah, you gotta love templates.
I think at one point I might have used Microsoft Front Page.
Oh,
That's a name
nice.
you haven't heard in a while.
Yeah. I was lucky enough that I think the first website I made was in Dreamweaver,
Yeah.
which
Was it Macromedia Dreamweaver
it
or
was.
Adobe? Yeah.
It was Macromedia Dreamweaver back in the day.
But yeah, that, so I kind of get my first exposure to web design or web development, if you can call it that. Like, these were pretty rough looking sites. They weren't masterpieces or
Right.
anything, but hey, I was 12, so give me a little bit of a break. I was 12. I had my fan site that I had made, and I had like this little crappy 3.5 millimeter like pencil beige microphone that I'm using. I'm sure it sounded awful.
I think I know exactly the one you're talking about.
Yeah.
It was like it comes with a base.
Yeah.
Yep, you have it on a heavy base, and it just sticks up and little tiny.
Yep.
Yeah, that was the mic. That was the mic. Were you ever like the kid that just like you put your mouth over it and you're like,
I'm sure.
this is where we lose all of our subscribers and listeners. 'Cause they're like,
100%.
what are these
Like,
people
this
talking about?
guy, this 12-year-old's just like playing Panic at the Disco that he pirated on LimeWire. And
Mm, the good old days. I think I started with Kazaa was my first one. I didn't do Napster, but Kazaa
yeah.
for sure.
The next kind of progression is we get to high school. And I recognize this is kind of a weird place to start for a career story, but I think there's defining moments in here that like come into play. Like,
Come on. Last episode I said I started in middle school, right? Like 7th grade was when I was like, yes, I like this.
yeah.
It's crazy how
So we get to high school, and you got to think I'm kind of 3 years removed from my friends' circles, and so they have moved on and have new people, and I'm just the new kid at high school.
yeah, totally understand that. So I mean, I went through something similar but very different at the same time. And
Yeah.
so I can completely understand what you might have gone through. How did that how did that change your like your day-to-day desire to do things? My passions changed because my
Yeah.
friends group changed, and as a child you're pretty impressionable. So I'm curious how that was what was that experience was for you.
Yeah. So for some reason, kid me assumed that going to high school, I needed to reinvent myself. So no
Mm.
longer was I going to be the kid that was in Habbo chat rooms. And, I wasn't going to follow pro wrestling anymore. Like those were things that weren't cohesive with being a high schooler because, yeah, we're past the heyday of pro wrestling being pop culture at this point.
Okay.
And so, I think with that, I didn't really add passions back, if that makes sense. I just kind of took them away. I'm the new
Mm.
kid, kind of the outsider. And I really think kind of fell into more of a down phase. I mean, I was
Mm.
doing pretty awful in school overall. I think English, I was getting an A, and then like history and science, I probably got a B, and then the rest were like C's and stuff. I got a C in gym because I wasn't willing to wear gym shorts. I got self conscious, and
Mm.
if you didn't wear gym shorts, they would just dock your grade for that day. But kind of in this down point, I was I made a couple friends freshman year,
Mhm.
but then they actually moved away. The friends that I did make
Oh
freshman year, which
man,
was really unfortunate. And
that's
so
not fun.
that summer was pretty dark because like I don't have anybody, I don't have my previous passions, and at that point I actually do a suicide attempt that was not
Oh my god.
successful.
Oh well, thank God for that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm here, so that part may be obvious, but
Yeah. Well, that's that man. That is a tough thing to admit, and I'm proud of you for being able to say that on a public space like this. It's a big thing.
yeah.
I'm assuming after that happened, a lot of things I've read on Reddit or seen online and stuff is like after something like that, you have a sudden realization of certain things, or something comes to mind, or your mindset changes, your passion, your ideas change, something happens. And so I'm curious if that was anything for you after that. Did you start to change what you did on a day-to-day basis?
To be honest, this is probably a little bit against the grain, but I don't think I had that moment
Mm.
immediately. I think almost instead of an appreciation for life, I developed a fear of death, is what I've kind of determined with
Mm. Okay,
my therapist. Is there's kind of a self-preservation there, the yin and
I see.
yang. And so,
Okay.
yeah. So that
Okay.
experience was a little bit different for me. But I think it's one of those things where I, I don't know that I always healed in high school, but you go on, you continue
Mhm. Right, right.
is kind of what I would. And I will say, like, this is skipping ahead a little bit, but I'm not much on like always on like fate or things happen for a reason always, but that experience actually let me help people later in life that were going through similar experiences, and it did let me be able to speak with them in like a little bit different
Right,
terms
right.
and help them through their own battles.
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad that you were able to get some. It's hard to even think about what I would want to reply to you on this, but I
Yeah.
guess I'm glad that you had a somewhat positive outcome from a pretty
Yeah.
scary topic, and
Yeah.
that you're able to help others that are going through similar things. That's a huge, huge benefit for them, right? I'm
Yeah.
very glad that you were able to help others.
Yeah, and obviously, looking at it now, like where I'm at, I have an amazing wife. I have, three amazing dogs, but when you're a teenager, you don't see that far ahead, frankly. Like
Yeah, yeah.
you're not that far thinking. You're just like, I'm in the middle of this and this is awful and I
You
don't want to
telling
do
me
it
that
anymore.
high school relationships don't last forever?
There's so much pressure on that too. Like I feel like I was in a couple relationships in high school and they were terrible fits, and it was just trying to be in relationships with people just to not be alone, frankly.
So I curious if you after that you kind of had this like forward looking mindset a little bit. You wanted to not be alone. You wanted a bit more of community and camaraderie. Did you end up joining any clubs or getting involved in the outside organizations?
Yeah. So I would say my sophomore year had some really bad core teachers, like the core curriculums. I didn't get along with them, which didn't help anything. But because of the school system that I was in, they actually had some what they would refer to as CTE classes, career and technical education classes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And as I enter my sophomore year, one of those was web design. I was able to do that, and then there was also they had a class called programming and logic, and they
Okay, yeah.
actually taught us a language called Dark Basic in that.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay. Okay, that seems a lot more fun than when I learned Basic and we were
yeah.
learning VB Basic.
Dark Basic was kind of this, I think, in some ways simplified language, and they wanted to gamify the learning, so you would build games in this language.
Cool.
And when I looked it up the
That's
other
so
day, I
cool
think it's
compared
kind
to
of dead, but
when I went through Basic, we were learning just literally just is like here's Visual Basic, create some
yeah.
forms and buttons. Like okay, drag and drop, I guess.
Yeah, so we're learning Dark Basic in the programming and logic class, and the other one that I caught on to was media production. And I had this idea when I was going in. I was like, well, I've used a camera before. What are they actually going to teach me? I'm going to be the hot shot and just know what to do because I've pressed record on a camera before. I had no idea what I was doing.
I still don't.
But I got in, and you start learning about like storyboarding a video and the
Mhm.
rule of thirds, and you start learning what shots are called. And once you learn what the shots are called at school, you immediately start noticing the shots in your shows and movies afterwards for a
Oh yeah,
while.
yeah, yeah. Yep, yep. It's like if you work in networking, odds are anytime you go to a hotel, you look up and you're like, yep,
Yeah.
that's go. Oh, that's an Aruba.
Yeah, I had to get the shots out of my mind because it was annoying watching shows and noticing that what the shots were. But when you're first learning, like, oh, over the shoulder, medium shot, that's the
Yep.
establishing shot.
Nowadays, I worked in the marketing industry for a while at one company. I didn't work in marketing, but the company was, and now I notice product placement way too easily.
Yeah. We also had cabling rodeos. Like we had a lot of XLR cables and different
Oh
BNC
yeah.
cables and stuff. And they taught us the proper way to over and under a cable so
Oh
like that you
nice. Yep.
don't like mess it up and everything. And
I
they would
do that
do
to my Ethernet cables
yeah,
and my
and they would
USB
do a
cables.
cabling rodeo to see like who could do it the fastest.
That's awesome. I love it. So I love that you're learning design and you're taking these classes. But these are more of courses during the school day, right?
They are. They would designate you on what they would call paths in high school. And there
Hmm.
was kind of the normal one. And then there was one called CTE. And it had different core requirements
Hmm.
than what a normal student would take, but it gave you the opportunity to take more technical classes. And they actually
Okay,
got
cool.
rid of it and or drastically changed it after I left. So it was something that
Oh wow.
wasn't there for very long. But
Hmm.
like one of the examples is, which I guess I kind of regret, but I probably wouldn't have had much fun in it, is I didn't have to take a foreign language. And that would come back to bite me later because most colleges want you to have a foreign language.
Yeah, that's true. But I think it does a disservice to the students learning a foreign language because you're forced to do it. And like
Yeah.
I spent like 6 years for learning Spanish, and I still don't know it well enough. Right?
Yeah.
I should have just gone to Spain for 6 months. That would have been so much better.
Maybe just watch some soap operas that are in Spanish.
So, I love that. I love this part of your high school experience because it's really similar to mine in that we were both doing technical classes in school. I mentioned that um, I was in a PC support class, which is we didn't call it CTE, but it's exactly the same thing, just different states, different terms. I'm curious, did you do any outside like competitions with? So like I did FBLA, which was Future Business Leaders of America, and that was a lot of fun. I should have mentioned a bunch of stuff about that, but I'm curious if you guys had access to programs like that at your school.
We did. And I want to step back for a moment because one of the things that I do like to do is give credit to mentors. Um, I don't know if they'll ever listen to this, but Mr. Keith Steffens was my teacher in a lot of the computer programming related classes, and Matt Balzer was the media classes. Those were teachers that you could tell cared, which makes a difference. And especially
Absolutely.
when someone's in a darker period, knowing that someone cares can be huge.
Absolutely. It is. It's amazing how you can look back and see yourself as a young adult or as an old child
Yeah,
and realize that you had access to these really cool things or these amazing people that wanted to see you succeed. And
yeah,
at the time, you don't really treat it with the respect that it deserves. Like they go out of their way. And like I know for a fact that my PC support teacher, she didn't like me because I was pretty arrogant. Like I've mentioned this a few times. I've been told that I wasn't a nice person when I was younger, but she taught me a lot.
yeah,
She opened so many doors, and I wish I maintained that relationship with her because I would love to like have a coffee, sit down 10 years later, 15 years later and be like, hey, you helped me out so much.
yeah,
And I just wanted to say, so thank you to all the teachers out there that have helped students. Absolutely
yeah.
huge thank you to all of you.
Yeah, even if you're too far to get a coffee, go send a message to the people that changed your lives today. If you
Mhm.
get one takeaway
Mhm.
from this episode, thank the people that helped you coming up.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But to get back to your question, so um, although okay, I'm gonna do one more sidebar. I did get a little bit arrogant at one point in computer repair class because that's one that I naturally got pretty good grades in just from knowing how to take things apart.
Right?
And
It inflates the ego so fast.
it does. One of the days, the thing was to just like put together a computer. So like I slept this thing together in no time, and I'm just like chit chatting. And I made a grave error that I would learn once I turned on the computer because I was in a hurry and it would
I want to guess. I
like
want to
like it
guess.
was posting and stuff. But I pressed the power button and I turn around to talk to my peers, and the computer starts smoking. Do you have any guesses what I may have done?
There's a few things. I'm assuming you no, see, that doesn't happen here because the power supply switch can cause some issues. I've seen forgetting to put thermal paste on the CPU.
Not thermal paste.
I'm thinking that you use a
It
paper
was
clip
it
to
was
inject.
pretty quick. It wasn't. It didn't take a while.
I don't know. I want to know. I want to know what did you do?
So I'm putting this computer together, and immediately unplug it because I'm like, well, I don't want it to continue to burn. We open up the computer, and like, what happened here? Luckily, the fire alarm didn't go off, but we had to air out the room a little bit. This computer had a floppy disk, and floppy disks have 3 pins, and it's possible to put only 2 on there. So I had
Mm.
shorted the floppy drive, and that had fried the whole power supply.
Oh man, that
So
and
that was
here
a
I
pretty
was
humbling
thinking.
experience.
Here in my head, I was like, he had to have used a paper clip to eject a CD drive, and then he dropped the paper clip inside the computer.
Nope.
But oh my god, at least power supplies are pretty cheap.
Yeah,
Forgetting to put the heatsink on a CPU, a little bit more
that's
expensive.
fair. Once I
Um,
got a new power supply, we posted. I was able to install Windows, but that was pretty humbling. But
that's awesome.
so to get back to your question, that a teacher, Keith Steffens, one of the things that he was involved with was an organization called Skills USA. If you haven't heard of it, at a super high level, they support career and technical education in schools, and they actually have competitions where you go to compete against other students. And they had a category called computer maintenance and repair, and it was basically sort of A plus based. And they had the opportunity and I guess the school funding and stuff, and said, let's send him to the contest for that.
Nice. Okay. So we had similar things in FBLA, and I know that you have you sometimes have school testing or school competitions, county, regionals, states, districts. What I don't know all the terms, right? Did you get to compete in? You just said that, right? You went to those competitions. How did you do? How
Yeah.
was the experience?
So with that, you could compete in the same category a couple years. The first year, I won first place in regional, and I
Nice.
didn't place in state at all. The
Okay.
second year, and I don't know if I had a takeaway of what I did wrong that time around, to be honest, but I can tell you what I did right the next time. So the next time around, I placed first in regional, I get to state, and I think I did pretty well with most of it, but there was one challenge that nobody was getting, and it was drive mapping, actually.
Ooh.
And I was actually fortunate that our school system had like a bad drive map policy or something, because I would have to remap our school drives constantly. So shout out to the
Yeah, a
school
little bit.
system
Yeah, a
ID.
little bit of experience.
But I got to that challenge and I tried mapping it via the GUI, and I could also use net. I'd figured out how to do net use. I tried both of those and I was prompting for a password. And, I sat there for a second and I looked at the instructions and there's no password on the instructions. And I'm kind of sitting there like, I don't, like, run out of time and stuff. And so
Right,
I
right.
finally called the judge over. I'm like, hey, I'm looking at this challenge. There's no credentials on here. And when I'm mapping this, it's asking for credentials. And he put the credentials in and it came up and was like, I was looking at the sheet. Do I need to do anything else? Said, nope, that's it. Okay. So I don't know if the credentials were supposed to be cached or if the challenge was like being willing to ask a judge a question. And that's what they were testing for. I don't know.
I bet you they forgot to put them on the paper.
I like the idea better that it was a challenge of being willing to ask a question to the user.
Right.
I,
It's
I
like
like that version better.
that's a hell of a lesson. It's like, sometimes you just don't know and you need to ask.
Yeah, but yeah, so it's kind of funny. Maybe I'll put the picture of this on the stand because I've got this like goofy long hair and stuff. But so the way they do it, they pull you up to the stage and there's three of us. So we know that we placed somewhere. And I'm
Mhm.
standing to the side of the stage and I'm like, man, I'm probably like third or something. So they call the third person, I'm like, well, I might have made second. And then they call the second person and I'm looking around like, this is me. And there's like a person like directing, traffic because it's, it's high schoolers. So they're directed people. And she was like, it looks like you won. I'm like, so then, I'm up at the stage and
That's
I think if I
awesome.
look at the picture, I'm kind of like puffed out. I'm wearing like this white.
Yeah, you're just like, yes, yeah, that's right. I knew I'd win. That's amazing. I love it.
Yeah. So I get through state, and that summer you could choose if you wanted to go or not, but I decided to go to nationals, see what that was about.
Mhm.
And one of the main judge there was Mike Myers, who, if you don't know,
Shit.
is with professional seminars, and he wrote a lot of the A+
Yeah,
books you would see for a lot of years.
that's so cool. And he still produces content, and you can
Yeah.
still find his videos on his YouTube channel. And I think he does content production for multiple other testing and certification platforms.
Yeah.
Super cool.
And he was kind of he was a like larger than life, really nice dude. Like he would wear
His
the
cowboy
cowboy
hat.
hat you saw in the
Yeah,
videos. He was wearing that in
yeah.
person too.
I
So
think I have I have a Network Plus book, an old like legitimate original CompTIA Network Plus written by Mike Myers certification book over there.
somewhere in my parents, I have a signed copy of the A+ book, which
That's so
it's
cool.
not worth anything, but it's cool to me.
That is worth a lot to us.
But it was kind of interesting at nationals. So I couldn't tell you everything we did, but one piece was you had like a part identification, and they would have some really old parts.
Hmm.
You would have to identify what the computer parts were. They actually had a computer with a dip switch issue, which I had never
Oh,
encountered, but figured out just by like reading the
hate these
prompt.
switches so
Yeah. You had to troubleshoot a computer, and the issue was the dip switches were set wrong.
much.
And I think the prompt, like they made the prompt fairly easy. It's like, the user said that they adjusted these dip switches from an online article, and now their computer won't start. And it told you which one they adjusted. So I just like, and then it
Well, there's only
posted.
two
I'm
options.
like, like, is this the challenge?
The challenge is finding a tool to push the dip switch.
Yep. I think they did provide a tool for that, which was nice.
So not a pencil.
Yeah. I can tell you the one that I failed at the time, I had not made many network cables, and you had to make a network cable that would pass the tester. and I failed that one for sure because I couldn't remember the order.
What? A or B?
You could do either, I think. It just had to pass.
I learned to make cables in middle school, and now when you're middle schoolers learning to make cables, you start to like memorize the color order. And to this day, I can just like spit it out in like poof, there it is.
We'll touch on this later, but I think I learned it best when I was in internal IT and I made 140 cables. And so by then I was getting it down.
Yeah. This 139th failure. Yeah, finally.
The cool part about that, though, is part of your score, and one thing that you got to do at nationals is you got to take the A+ test. And so during that, I passed my A+. I think I was 16 at the time. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, you're telling me that means, did you get A+ lifetime, or was that?
I missed the lifetime cut by 6 months.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So I am not A+ certified today. That is long expired.
That's okay. That's okay. We can re-up. GTIA, we were looking for sponsors, and so this is you're 16. You just got an A+ certification. You got first place in nationals.
Sorry, I did not get first place in nationals.
Oh, sorry, state.
Yeah.
And you competed in national, right?
Yeah.
But that is huge. Like that must have made you feel like you could do anything.
Yeah.
You know, like what was the next thing? Did you start to 16, I'm assuming you were in 10th or 11th grade. That's sophomore, junior year.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you still had a couple more years of school, maybe.
Yep. So one more thing I'll give a shout out on. We weren't necessarily sure if my parents even had the money for me to go nationals. And Mr. Steffens took the time to go to kind of a peer group that he was a part of. There was a private education like peer group for the school system, and a local bank along with a I think the other one was a marketing firm, not one that I worked for, but a marketing firm as well. They actually put up the money for me to go to the competition, which
that's awesome.
I may have not been able to do without that.
I think that's I was talking to a friend about this, like how businesses can do more, or a little bit of a sidebar, I guess, but the conversation we had was about how to grow your own business and stuff. And I was like, to be honest, the number one way that we grow our business is through community outreach. And we're not doing it just to be like, yeah, we're donating money, or yeah, we're contributing to this nonprofit. But
yeah,
I grew up doing a lot of nonprofit work, a lot of volunteering. I graduated high school with like too many hours of volunteering. And one thing we talked about was how the whole reason, or one of the giant benefits to contributing and funding nonprofits or contributing to your community, is that you have the chance or an opportunity to help the next person, help some kid become the next president or the next billionaire or the next astronaut or the next, CEO of something, right? Somebody, you have a chance to make a huge impact on somebody that for you as a business owner might be a drop in the bucket, but for that kid, it's what accelerates their career or changes their entire mindset or finally gives them the chance to shine. And I think that's worth it, because uplifting our youth and uplifting community is what we need to be doing more of
100%.
as a society. But anyways, circling back to what you were saying.
Yeah.
I love that you were able to go because of your community.
Yeah.
And now today you're a huge proponent of community.
Yeah. And I'll say, like, one of the things that obviously they didn't do it for this, like the ROI is not there, but they like did a press release, and like I had my picture in the paper after I won state from nice. These, like, because the like bank owners took a picture with me and took me to a steakhouse or whatever. So like at the time, like, oh, this is pretty cool.
Absolutely.
But yeah, we get through the competition. I come back. I'm actually doing pretty well in media class, and I got connected with some really good people that I was able to work with and create some cool things. And I would get signed on to, we had a weekly school broadcast. I
Mhm.
got signed on to that team. Mr. Balzer was, I don't know, I think he pitied me a little bit or something and put me on there. But it turns out some of the graphics that I created like a lower third graphic and kind of an arched like news banner type graphic.
Mhm.
And those along with another person. And then I also had an experimental film. Basically, the video that we made was really trippy, for lack of a better term. And so they put it in the experimental category, and we won that year.
Dude, that is
Yeah, I mean it was a state level, but I mean, yeah, it's
still.
awesome. Yeah. Now I have my A plus,
Mhm.
which I'm kind of hoping opens some doors for me. And so the first place I apply was Geek Squad, which is, we learn in your episode is a place that
Yeah.
that you
Well,
you had a short spurt in,
yeah.
but I would actually be rejected by mine. They
Well,
weren't liking what I was putting down, but I was 16, so I'll cut them a little slack.
when I worked at Best Buy, I think they refused to hire minors in Geek Squad.
Yeah, that's probably the case. I applied to some local shops and they just ghosted me for the most part. And so I actually go back to a little bit of that fan site experience in middle school, and I kind of hyper focused on WordPress sites and making them perform better, which was something that a
Okay.
lot of people, this is 15 years ago. So
Mhm.
some companies barely had a website if they had one still, which is kind of wild to think about.
Yellow Pages only died off like this decade.
Yeah. But, people would put these themes up and stuff, and they were made horribly inefficient. So,
Mhm.
DSL was still a pretty common thing, and you'd have these sites that would take 10 seconds, 15 seconds to load. And, at that time, people are just going to give up and not visit your site, honestly, like if it's that slow. And so I started, Google came out with a tool called Page Speed Insights, and it would tell you where
Oh
your
yeah,
website was horribly
yeah.
inefficient.
That's still around, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it looks a little bit different today because obviously a lot of practices have changed. But so I would start to identify like what was slowing their site down, and I went on a site. This is a minute ago, but a site called Fiverr, and I put up gigs, and I would
Mm.
make like $5 or $10 speeding up WordPress sites and fixing issues with WordPress sites.
Okay. Okay. That is a man. I wish I did things like that when I was 16. I would have
Um,
been
and I
really
mean,
productive.
I had a surprisingly, I don't know, I probably fulfilled 50 orders or something like that, which, for a high
Wow.
school kid, that's pretty good.
Yeah. And I'm assuming that you weren't, these weren't $5 jobs.
I definitely undercharged.
Okay. Okay.
But I mean, I was gaining experience from that. I was like it's like, oh, this plugin's crap. You should use this plugin. This plugin's why your site's broken.
And I'm sure you learned a lot of skills beyond just simply making money, right? You learned how to communicate with clients. You learned how to, take payments, how to manage your own money, how to start to sell yourself and advertise.
Yeah,
You don't realize you're learning those skills when you're in high school, but it's important. And that's actually something that like Skills USA teaches you how to start
true.
to communicate and be a better, well, now that I think about it, all those jobs are just told how to have better employees.
But to circle back a little bit, like I have the A plus now. I'm doing this WordPress stuff, but I want to find something that I can do with this A plus thing that I have now. And I've applied to Geek Squad. I've applied to local shops, and they're not having it. So I
Hmm.
go to my trusty pal Craigslist, and I start responding to every ad in the computer gig section that I can find. And it was like odds and ends kind of work, but one of these days I find an ad for a company that's looking for someone. I think the requirements were like A plus. I interview and they don't ask me my age at any point in the process. And so I submit my resume, I do the interview, and I had to send them a driver's license at one point, but
Oh,
they accepted me. They said, "You're hired." And so what this company did is they had the contract for HP's warranty work.
that's
You would
cool.
you could
Yeah.
fix printers, laptops, desktops is primarily what they did, sometimes servers.
Hmm.
And the way it worked was kind of gig based. You would log into a portal and you would see what jobs were available that day, and it would tell you how much they were paying and stuff. And they kind of had a system where when a job first came out, it would be worth maybe $20 at the time. And then if it was on there longer, I think it would get up to a max of $40. And then different types of jobs paid different things. One of the problems is, there's actual adults on this platform making it a full-time job, and I'm just trying to part-time this thing. And so they would get the closer and better jobs before I was able to log on. So there were jobs that were pretty close to me that paid pretty well, and they would grab them. So what I primarily ended up doing there was motherboard troubleshooting, which is really weird.
I'm surprised that you actually got to do troubleshooting. It was just replacements.
It was mostly replacements, but you had to verify that the motherboard was actually bad. You had these are the conditions. You had a multimeter, and you would measure the voltages and make sure the power supply was good.
Wow, that's different than how HP does them today. That's for sure.
I'm sure. And then it was a paper sheet. The tablets weren't as common, so we had a paper sheet you had to print out that had the address and the customer name. You go on site. The first thing you have to do is call the company, and you wait on hold for hours. So I would just start getting to work while I'm waiting on hold. And these are remote places, and I had really crappy cell service. So this job did allow me to get a phone, but I had really crappy service. And so I'm using the customer's landline. I'm replacing the motherboard. I'm on hold for 60 minutes. There's a process you have to do called tattooing the motherboard that took a little bit. And yeah, so when you look at OEM licensing, the way that the OS determines that you have a valid license is through a process called tattooing the motherboard. When it's originally installed, OEMs have a tattoo on the motherboard that has the license. And so I burned this.
Secret sauce.
Yeah. So I burned the disk, and when you install it, you type in the serial code or the serial number, and it burns that into the motherboard to give it a valid license.
Dang, that's pretty cool.
I believe it's like a write once chip. You couldn't change it after it's written to once, I believe is the way that worked.
Right. This isn't a physical tattoo or a physical burn.
Right. I'm not bringing out a tattoo gun. It's like a digital tattoo.
Right. That's pretty cool though, that I didn't know that was a thing, that you would have one-off chips that were just waiting for a code to be entered, and once it is, there you go. It's used as validation.
I think the process is similar today, except USB instead of CD, but it's possible it's different now. That's been a long time ago.
Wow. Okay. Yeah,
but I'm mostly
work like that in a while.
Yeah, but I'm mostly doing these motherboard gigs because that's all I could get. They were really far away, and they took a lot of time for not a bunch more money.
And they take so long. Laptop motherboard replacements 10 years ago were not fun. No, God. Laptops were hard to take apart.
We would do desktop motherboard replacements too, though.
That's a lot better. And honestly, I would say it was almost easier than it is today. That's true. But things have gotten so small today. It's I can't, my fingers don't fit.
So then I start to look for a little bit steadier work because I'm getting these one-off motherboard replacements, and they're kind of a pain. And I'm driving, my crappy little high school car, which I had a car, but it wasn't the best car. It was tried to break down on me a couple times. But I find a little bit more steady job. There was a marketing startup this is another one of those things where I was at the right place at the right time, I guess. But they reached out to our school and do you have anybody that would want to intern? And so I got a position. Yes. Yeah, I got a position at this marketing startup, and the role that they gave me for my internship was IT ninja. So that was my first kind of that was first steady job title was IT ninja, and it was web focused. And so I would build these little tools. One of the things that they would have me build would be web scrapers. My web scrapers were not terribly efficient. They told me that they didn't want it to go too fast and get them blocked. So I made ones that were much slower than they probably should have been.
Sleep.
And I'm gonna be honest. I thought I knew what I was doing. I was on the peak amount stupid. I'm looking up, on websites to figure out what I'm doing and pasting together internet code, and I'm getting the job done. But yeah,
you weren't.
I guess that's what high school interns are good for, is pasting internet code together.
Better or worse than AI code?
That's a tough one. I didn't hallucinate things that didn't exist. It's the internet meme picture that has like the old car with the lanterns on the front, I think is a good illustration of it, where you paste something from the internet and it's accidentally fancy in one aspect.
So I love that you went from just a few years. You went from just starting to, figure out what you wanted to do and what you liked kind of,
Yeah.
to having a job. And this is,
Yeah.
you're still an adult at this point. You're still a kid.
Yeah. This was my junior year of high school. I got hired at
Wow.
this company.
So did you continue to go down that path? Like when did you step into like your quote unquote first real job?
I will get there in a second. I'll tell you really quick, because one of my mistakes is I did not do a good job juggling all that or communicating with the boss that I had, that I was overwhelmed because I started this job in the summer
Okay.
and then school came back up. And frankly, I was overwhelmed with everything. I was going to school, and then after I got off school, I would work for 6 hours to 8 hours there. And then I'd go home and try to learn more stuff and be up till 3 a.m. and then get back up at 6 a.m. was my routine. And so
Wow.
I didn't know what this was or that I was, but I burn out, frankly. So I burn out, and it's not a good working relationship. And do tell them that I'm ready to move on, and but it wasn't a good fit for me. And my senior year, I kind of start focusing back on kind of some of the freelance stuff I did and not having a steady job again. Because
Gotcha.
and maybe if it was at a different time, like if I would have got that job after high school, I think I'd probably would have done a lot better. But just the way the cards lay sometimes.
Yeah, I mean it's really hard sometimes when you're trying to learn how to do a job and going through those formative years.
Yeah.
I mean, hell hath no fury like a teenager's hormones.
Well, and that doesn't help, right? Because at the time, like I'm starting to build a friend circle too. So like I'm not getting to hang out with the friends that I've made very much. I'm working all the time, and like my school grades are suffering, and so it wasn't a good fit. I should have quit the job before school started again and came back in retrospect.
So what, I think I like that you're reflecting on that and you realize that now, but back then, you probably didn't realize it. So
No, I mean, in
was the
some
next
aspects,
thing?
I was kind of a little bit of a cocky kid too at that point, because like I had my A plus. I'm starting to
Right,
feel a little bit like hot stuff, kind of.
right,
And
right.
so I get out of there. I've saved some money up, so I try a few different things of making money. I invested with like a shady Forex guy and lost a little bit of money on that. I bought
Just a
some.
little.
Well, I didn't have a lot to lose, but for me, it was a lot of money. But we're probably talking maybe $300, which when you're in high school is quite a bit. I also got into micro niche sites. And the way this would work is these people would sell you businesses basically, and they would come up with an idea for a blog. They would build the site and the blog, rank it on
Back in
Google,
those.
and sell it to you. And then the idea was you would bring in AdSense revenue. I had some really weird ones too. I had one was called Turtle Facts. I had Trending Tote Bags, which was a per site, and I had Netbook versus Tablet.
Oh my God, I remember those days. Oh God, netbooks were the worst. Really
Yeah.
fun, but God.
And the idea was you would capture these long tail keywords where people were searching for things. And because your domain was Netbook versus Tablet or tote bags, you would get picked up and get the AdSense revenue or other revenue for that.
Back before everyone knew about Google search trends.
Yeah. But
so I mean, so I like that you went from having like a formal job, working at a desk, you're all over the place, and you're approaching you're approaching adulthood.
I do have one more twist, because why can't I should have a bunch of different jobs, I guess. But so I get towards the end of high school, and I'm not sure if IT or web development was the right thing. I can tell you that when I was in web development, it was in office. Remote work wasn't really a thing. And I sat in this cubicle that was 12 feet high, or at least it seemed like it back then to me. And they just put me in a quiet corner, and I didn't get to interact with anyone else in the company. They just had me making these tools. And one of the thoughts I had is, I don't think I can do this for a career. Like, this is awful being in this cubicle.
Yeah, I can understand that.
And so I took a left turn and decided to start training to be a car mechanic.
What? Okay.
I actually get a scholarship to a technical school to learn how to be a car mechanic.
Okay.
And so,
I mean, at least in your defense, a car mechanic is the same as a computer technician.
there's
When
a
you
lot of
get down
critical
to it,
thinking involved if you're doing a good job.
yeah, it's like it's the same stuff, right? You troubleshoot, you twist some stuff, you swap out some things. There you go. Just one
Yeah.
has more fluid than the other, unless you're dealing with water cooled systems.
Yeah. So I graduate high school and I'm kind of picking my next path of what to do. And I have this mechanic college skip. I kind of want to go to college, but like I said before, I didn't have the foreign language that they wanted. So they wanted me to appear in front of a board and explain to them why I should be admitted to their college, even though I didn't meet the requirements, which
Oh,
felt kind of yucky to me.
interesting. Okay.
So I didn't do that. During this time, I mean, Mr. Steffens comes in clutch again, and he's had someone from this IT company reach out to him and ask him if, they have anybody that wants to like have an internship or be involved or something. And he forwards it
Another
over to
internship.
me and he's like, hey, do you have any interest in this? And
Huh.
so that is when I am introduced to what the heck an MSP is.
I still have that question sometimes. So this is your first foray into like a full-time job is
Yeah.
at an MSP.
Yeah,
Holy crap, that's like trial by fire.
it is.
I'm curious, like what did you start out as a level 1 tech?
So when I started, my title was intern. And
Okay,
the thought
truly
kind of was that I would be there for a couple months and then maybe I'd go to school, the technical school, or I'd figure college out. But I was just going to be there for the summer and make a little money.
Gotcha,
And
okay.
I mean, I thought I was doing pretty well because I think I was making like $14 an hour. So, coming out of high school, like my friends are working fast food. And I'm like, oh man, I
Right.
got this going for me.
Right. So, now that you're at an MSP, you're interning.
Yeah.
You're only going to be there for the summer. What kind of stuff were you doing? What did you fix? Like, what did you start to realize? Like, oh my God, there's so many different things you got to know.
Yeah, so I can remember the first ticket I got was an Adobe Reader issue, and it had something to do with the margins. And I think they were expecting it to be a little bit of a challenge for me, but I Googled it and I came back like 10 minutes later and I went to the boss like, hey, I fixed that. Do you have anything else? And they were like, okay.
They're like, oh, we got stumped on that. I guess the new kid.
Googled that. I don't think they were stumped. I just thought that they just thought, I was just going to be some kid to hang around for the summer or something.
Right.
Like he may be a little bit useful after all.
They were just like, just need to check a box off to say we did this. And they're like,
Yeah.
never mind. I guess this person's able to do some work.
Yeah. But so then like I kind of learned more and more. Like there was a network admin named Adam who is a super nice guy. At the time, he was kind of burnt out. And the thing that I always remember about him is he really liked to focus on one thing at a time. I think I could say that, and that would be true for him. And, MSP life, you're shuffling a lot of things. And so he'd already be working on a ticket or a project, and he's going along, and then someone would link him with an issue, and he would just start angry typing. He had the IBM buckling spring keyboard, and he just like, he's like responding back, like, did you try this?
Angry, or was it just really mechanical?
It was a little of both. It felt personal. I'm going to be honest when I bothered it. But so what I did, like I kind of picked up on that. And, some of this may be my trauma, but I kind of picked up that, like, how can I help this situation? And so I would try to be the least annoying person possible to network admin. So when I came to him with the problem, I would have a detailed list of everything that I tried, which were the things that he had told me to do before. I would write down everything he told me to do before when these issues would come up. And I'd say, okay, Adam, I tried all this. And then his typing would slow down a little bit. He's like, let me look at this. That's the sound that he would make. You go. And
I got yelled at doing that once.
And I had some really cool opportunities where like I would stay late just to learn more because he would work late. And so I got to be involved pretty early on and like helping them move between data centers.
Cool. Okay.
And, I'm just the guy like moving cables and stuff. I'm basically labor, but you get to start to pick up on some of that stuff that you normally just wouldn't be exposed to.
Right.
We moved from a Windstream data center in Nashville down to this data center that was closer, and a little bit easier to get to, and not in downtown Nashville with all the traffic. Because there's nothing worse than having a downed server and having to fight traffic to get to it.
That's like a mistake that I think, or not a mistake. I think that is something that a lot of people don't realize.
Yeah.
That you have to know, how do you get to your data center on the worst possible day?
Yeah.
And if you don't know that, if you don't understand that problem before you sign to get into that data center, you're for a hell of an awakening at some point. You're learning from Adam. You're learning from your coworkers.
Yep.
And did you start to pick up on things that they were doing and be like, oh, I can take that, I can use this, or you can...
Yeah. And jumping a little bit, another good mentor I had, kind of the person I was working under, was Dan. And I would refer to him as almost a customer service expert. And he really gave me like a lot of mentorship on how to give the customer a good experience, and frankly, how to deal with angry customers and, all the above. But yeah, as I move along, like I start coming up with improvement ideas, and I was probably annoying at times, but I wanted to make a positive change. I had coworkers that were getting headaches, and we had these like really obnoxious fluorescent lights, and so I wrote up a proposal to change the lights to a warmer white so people wouldn't get headaches as often. And I wrote up a proposal to buy an RF modulator, because we didn't have metrics on all the TVs that were in the screens, and we couldn't afford a computer for every TV. So my idea was to take the output from the computer, put it in an RF modulator. We already had coax running to all the TVs. They were wired for cable, and just turn to channel 3 and see the metrics across the office.
What is this, elementary school all over again? That's a fun one.
It did not get approved.
That is still a difficult problem today.
Yeah.
Even with all the technology, and to make it's so much easier than it was back then, and yet it still can be a headache.
Yeah.
Replicating screens across an environment.
So I'm probably a little annoying at times, but I'm learning along the way. The other thing I do when I stayed late, my boss would play League of Legends, and he invited me to play League of Legends with him. I don't know if he expected me to say yes, but I was like, okay. And so we'd get to the end of the day and deal with all of our tickets, and then we'd play League of Legends, and I'd main Master Yi, main Ashe, Vayne, eventually Jinx, some of those characters.
Yeah, that's fun. Damn. So you're not only learning, you're having fun.
Yeah.
You're gaining more and more experience.
Yeah.
I can only imagine that you start to take on more roles and do more and more with your career then. I mean, you're starting to set the foundation for actually having a career in IT, especially in within the MSP industry.
Yeah. So I feel like I can thank mapped network drives for a lot of points in my career, because they were involved in me winning the state competition, I think. And next thing that they would come in,
the ROI on that,
just learning how to map a network drive was huge, apparently. So one of the things that I would always try to do is kind of pick up things that weren't being done. And one of the things that I noticed is we had some clients with 2003 servers and just some inconsistent environments that the network drives would drop off. And we'd get daily or recurring calls sometimes from different sites to remap a network drive. And we're using VNC, so it actually took a second to connect in, because some of these clients had T1s even. So you get the call, you have to try to figure out the computer. Hopefully it's named to match the person's name. You find the computer, you click VNC, you sit there and wait for this page to load across so you can see their screen. Then you get in and try to figure out the mapped drive and what server it's on and all of this. And so we had an automation tool called LabTech, and I set off to try to figure out how to make that process a little bit smoother. And when I did the research on it, first I tried using my netuse command that helped me so much in high school in the competition, and that did not work. Do you know why that is?
There was no domain?
Not quite. So when you run scripts in an RMM, oftentimes they're ran at the system level.
Yeah,
They're
that's
not
right.
ran at the user level. So when you're doing something like mapping a network drive, it's specific to the user
I
profile.
forgot that because I can run my scripts as the current user, and I do that quite often. But
Yeah.
that's completely right. You can't just do that.
Yeah. And so I look up and I find this VB script on how to run a script as a current user online. And I put that in LabTech, and now I can map network drives. So I create an automate script and I like pre-populate, I forget what they're called, but there's kind of these variables per client. And I would put the server, like the drive paths in those variables. And when you ran map network drive,
Was there not a domain? Like, you're not using AD for these?
there was, but the map drives would fall off. I don't know. I couldn't tell you what the issue was at the time, but they would disconnect and disappear.
See, what I did, I think when I had that problem, is I've done it a few times too. I think I just set them to reconfigure every login.
My script did that. So the nice thing is, as my script went through, it started fixing these, so we didn't get future calls back.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah,
Sweet.
so it was kind of a 2-for-1.
You're already starting to automate things and learn more about how to increase the efficiencies of the IT department and technical. So you're already starting to do so much to learn all this automation and figure out how to make your job easier, how to make your clients better, happier, make the technology more efficient.
Yeah.
Did you then start to do more and more of that and realize that, hey, scripting is awesome. Let me start to make scripts for everything under the sun?
I start to get more things, and I continue this path of looking for what's not being done and trying to pick things up. And there wasn't a lot of automation happening. There was a lot of reactive support happening. And as I did that more and more and started building more things and implementing things that were shared online, I think our lab tech rep maybe even reached out and offered a discounted cost, or I couldn't tell you the pricing details, but the company decided to send me to the LabTech boot camp, which was our RMM. They had an actual in-person boot camp you could go to.
Yeah.
So I go down there and I'm loving it. I'm in the Tampa area at their headquarters. It's the first time I take a taxi, and the taxi driver drove wild on the way to Tampa. But I get down there and I am like loving the training. I couldn't tell you the name of the trainer. I wish I remembered. One of the things that I actually got out of that I wasn't aware of is there was a site called LabTech Geek that had came out. And if you're not familiar, LabTech Geek at that time was a little IRC channel. There was like Martin at ConnectWise was there. This is a really cool experience. I'm loving it. But I also, from a community aspect, I stay in touch with all the people that I go in the camp with. We still have a Facebook group today that's called LabTech Camp, like 2013. And we still keep in touch with everybody from this boot camp over 10 years ago.
Cool. Oh, that's awesome. There's definitely something special about maintaining those relationships over time.
100%.
How you might not talk every day, but it's just cool to be able to have something shared you can kind of center yourselves on.
Yeah, just those friends you see now and then. You're like, oh, hey, bud, how you doing? Then the following year, I would get to go to Automation Nation, and that was a cool experience because I'm probably one of the younger.
That's also run by ConnectWise, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Automation Nation was, primarily based around lab tech. And I'm probably one of the younger ones there. But, I'm getting to hang out with a lot of people that I've seen in the chat room and posting on the forums. I'm like, oh, these people are in real life now. And you get to see kind of the new things that are coming out. I don't know if I had rose-colored glasses. I don't think I did, but it was a really cool experience for sure. But I built all this knowledge, and my MSPs kind of like, hey, he's pretty good at this kind of stuff. And we were in peer groups, and I would actually start doing some basic consulting for other MSPs in our peer group that were using lab tech, and I'd help them do very basic stuff that they weren't doing today. We'd start help building software deployment automations.
Nice. Okay. So you're not only did you learn more how to do your job more easily, so it doesn't waste your time, and two, so you don't make mistakes because
Yeah,
if you do the same thing over and over, you're bound to screw up at some point. And
100%.
when you're onboarding a new user, it's not a good time to mess up.
Yeah. And, we actually kind of make this little practice, I guess, where we're also selling lab tech to internal IT clients. And
Nice. Okay.
it's probably weird for them to be learning from like a 19-year-old, but I would go on site and I would run like a very short version of the camp that's just like, here's how you use lab tech.
Hey, I taught a senior citizen group when I was 18 or 19 at the time. Literally, I was teaching a bunch of people that were 4 times my age
Yeah.
how to use the iPad so that way they can FaceTime their grandkids. And they loved it. They were just like, this is great.
Yeah.
Right? I bet you those clients were just like, this is awesome that we can learn this cool technology, and then they can take it and run with it, right? No one cares about your age when you're learning something cool.
Yeah.
Well, as you're doing this, as you're, you're starting to do more and more. I'm assuming then you continue doing more and more. Are you starting to like now you're the head honcho for automation at your MSP? Where does that lead? Because I know where you are today. I'm trying to almost predict your path, and every time I attempt, I'm wrong. So I want to know what the next twist in your story is.
Yeah. Well, I'm still just, technology consultant or whatever the role was.
I thought you were going to say you were still intern.
No, but by this point, I think I'm going to stick around. I'm not the intern anymore, but I am like the level 1, technical consultant, frontline help desk, and then doing this other stuff on the side. And so, what better thing to do when you're tier 1 than why don't you start a side hustle? And so I started a digital car magazine.
Man, of all the things you could start, you started a magazine, and here I'm like, he's going to start offering residential service because his MSP probably doesn't do residential, or he's going to start, tutoring lessons for high school students learning technology. But no,
yeah. I kind of saw this void in the type of car that I liked and was passionate about, where there weren't any blogs or anyone writing about them, but I knew that car, which was a Chevrolet Cobalt, was too small of a niche to do a magazine on just that. And someone had done that before and failed. So I'm like, I know what I'll do. The name of the engine is Ecotech. It's an Ecotech engine. And so I will create Ecotech magazine. And because that encompasses more than one car model, that will be my key to success. And I do a little bit of guerrilla sign-up marketing here. So what I did is I joined all the Facebook groups related to these cars that had these engines. And I would message the owners and I would say, hey, 1, do you want to be involved in it? 2, can I share it in your group? I wouldn't post it without asking permission, but everyone said yes.
Nice. Okay.
And so I grabbed a group of writers that were different group owners and they would write the articles for the magazines. And if you look on my LinkedIn, I have a digital copy of that the first magazine that we put out.
Okay.
So I wrote a couple articles. We had articles from different people. And then I paid someone on Fiverr to put the magazine design together. And then
giving back to the next Fiverr person.
Yeah. So, and then I put together a website and put the magazine on there, and we got 20,000 people viewed the first magazine.
What? Dang. That's a lot.
Another strategy I had, and I couldn't really tell you where I got this from, but on these Facebook groups, we ran a competition to vote for who had the best Ecotech car. And so they had the link to the magazine in the picture, and they would have all their friends vote on their car. And we got to post in all these groups running this competition. And there really wasn't even a prize. It was just being a part of the community and being in the magazine. But that got us a ton of viewership. I had people that were deployed reach out to me via email because they were kind of restricted in what sites they could access, and they would ask me to email them the magazine, which was kind of cool.
Absolutely. That is crazy. I would never expect that you were able to like find like success in getting your content out there at your first foray into production, print
Yeah.
media, but digital.
We go along for a couple, don't get it too excited because we go along for a couple of issues, and I'm looking at it like, I don't know that I want to put the money into this to
Ah,
have the designer do it every time.
okay, okay.
And I was like, this doesn't make as much sense. Like, I didn't have the smarts to look for sponsors, and because there were definitely companies that would have sponsored it, but I just didn't have the networking or connections to make that happen. And I was
Okay.
like, I'm kind of putting money into something that's not going to go anywhere. And so I gave up pretty early on that because I'm also doing this IT job thing.
So I'm really curious. What's your next thing? Because you're starting to do more at your MSP. You're not getting the title you deserve. I'm assuming you're not going to get the raise you deserve. You're starting to branch out into other things, and they are not working. So what happens? What's the next step in Ben's career?
I'm chugging along with MSP, and they gave me a couple little raisins, but I felt like I was bringing a lot of value to the company, and I was working a lot of hours. I was salary at this point. They said, I think they thought I was working a little bit too much overtime because I'd take whatever I could get. And I would do productive things. I wasn't just killing time, but I would work a lot of hours.
Hmm.
And
Nothing wrong with that.
and I just felt like I was worth a little bit more. I had another offer from one of the MSPs that I went to boot camp with that would have been for a lot more, but I didn't really want to move to Louisiana because, again, this remote thing, that it wasn't possible for IT people to work remote. That'll never
Right.
work.
Of course.
So I'm going along, and for everything, that first MSP, from some of the horror stories that I've heard, they didn't treat me poorly. I just felt a little undervalued, and as a young kid, you're kind of frustrated when you feel like you've hit a ceiling and you can't move forward. And so,
Yep.
um,
Yep.
by kind
I
of
know that.
happenstance, I actually have the old startup marketing firm that I'd worked for. That person had
Ah,
started a new company, and they reached out to me and let me know that their IT manager was leaving the company, and they
mhm.
wanted to know if I might be interested in that position. So,
I mean, besides pivoting careers if you end up taking that job, but the fact that you had an old boss that reached out to you and you were an intern, right? You were
yeah,
not a fully fledged regular employee.
I was
You were,
probably a bad intern, but I think he did follow my story from there and kind of saw, like, this guy's doing IT work, and, maybe we both had some growing to do, that sort of thing, as we
yeah,
would talk
but
more.
for you to leave an impression, I think that's one of the most important takeaways is you never know when a past connection gets you even a connection or
Yeah.
that links you to the next step. That's why you
Yeah.
never burn bridges. It's important
Yeah.
that you always treat, even though you might not like the situation, you still have to treat it with some respect because you never know when it's coming back to hopefully not bite you but treat you right.
Yeah. Their IT manager had left. He was getting into college IT. He would actually work for one of the big colleges in the Nashville area, and I
Hmm.
think he had a good time there. He eventually moved on to some stuff even cooler than that, but that was what he felt was right for his next step in the career, kind of leaving this gap at this marketing firm. And so I did the interview, and I really prepped for this interview. I didn't take it for granted that it was someone that I was new. In retrospect, it was maybe a little bit cringe, but what I did, and I'm sorry, SNS, I used the office printer for this, for my job interview. I printed my resume on the office printer. And the other thing I did is we kept track of customer surveys, and I had a lot of really nice customer surveys, and I printed out all those
Nice.
surveys and brought them with me.
I need to dig those up. Those are always good to read.
So I go to this interview. They have like pretty common for IT jobs then and now to have a little quiz. So they have like a 2-page quiz the existing IT guy comes up with, and I get pretty much all the questions right. When it gets to the port questions, the key thing that I would say sometimes is, I'm not sure, I think it's this. And the nice thing is we're going through a list of ports together that he's asking, and then later on I'm like, oh, that's not the port, it's this. So I would go back and correct myself. I hand them the stack of customer surveys, which was probably a little bit goofy, and then I had a tablet and I showed them like some of the cabling work that I was doing, and different projects I had worked on along the way.
Okay. That's pretty cool. I mean, so you prepared, you had your stuff ready. You were
Yeah.
just like, I deserve this. I bet he was just like, you already had the job, dude. I don't need
Yeah.
to see any of it.
Yeah. He's not the kind of guy to say that, but probably in his head, he's like, okay, dude.
I
So,
don't know what this means.
I didn't really know what kind of money would be involved because I'm just interviewing for this job and I'm going to see if I can make a little bit more there, or if it's a better
Right.
fit. And they send me an offer, and it's for, I'm not even 21 yet. It's for $60,000,
Wow.
which from
That's
at
like
that
great.
time was a lot.
Right. And you I don't know if we clarify this, but you hadn't gone to college. Right. Like this is 65 with just a high school diploma at 21, right? I think when I was
I
21, I
wasn't
was
even
making
21.
not even
I
20.
started the job right before I turned 21.
When I was 20, almost 21, I was making 23,000 a year at a full-time job.
Yeah.
It wasn't full-time a year, like it was a whole thing. It's not like I was underpaid, but
Yeah.
the number of days I worked, yeah, you didn't get too much money out of it.
Yeah.
But that is amazing. 65K.
I
21.
don't know if this was a rude move. Well, so the way they had it laid out is it was 60,000, and then if you stayed for 3 months, you get a $5,000 signing bonus, which
Gotcha.
was pretty
Okay.
attractive to me to get like this pile of cash dumped on me.
Yeah. Yeah. One time, easy. Buy myself a new computer.
Yeah. But, I really wanted to be loyal to the MSP that had given me much. And so I can't tell if this was a rude or smart thing to do, but I was transparent with them. I blacked out the company name and I took the offer back to him. And I was like, hey, this is the offer that I have. Do you think we could meet in the middle on this somewhere? Because I wanted to give him the chance. Like I would have liked to continue my career there. Is actually going to be less money. On the flip side,
Less than you were currently making, or less than the offer?
Less than the offer.
Okay.
It was probably
told them to meet them in the middle.
Yeah. So this new offer was like 15,000 more than I was making, and they came up, I think, like 2,000. But there was the potential for commission. I'll give them that. Right. There was a potential for commission.
Okay.
If I go to the flip side, this other company that's going to offer me more, offer me a signing bonus. They said in their culture, we just want you to come to work in a t-shirt and jeans.
So your current outfit.
Yeah. So, as a 20-year-old, you're like, well, I want to be comfortable in my own skin. I don't want to like be someone I'm not and feel fake. Yeah. Like, yeah. Okay. And so I put a lot of thought to it, and I ended up going for this IT manager position. And, the first thing that people listening out there, if you get a good raise, the first thing you should do is keep your existing budget and not spend extra money. You should keep spending what you're worth spending and save the rest. Keep your lifestyle what your former income was. Yeah. Don't do what I did, which was take my signing bonus and go buy a car. But getting back to this, so I go with the IT manager position.
Nice.
And
okay.
It was tough to say goodbye to these people that had kind of helped me get started, but I knew it was time to not get stagnant and to do something different. I felt like it was a little bit undervalued for what I was bringing to the table. Some of the projects that I do while I'm there, when I get there, their firewall's crashing all the time. They had a little watch guard. Their access point was overheating because they were in a metal building and it was on the ceiling of the metal building, which gets really hot in the summer. Their server closets.
If they have a metal building, that typically means the ceiling height's pretty high.
It is. So it's a bad experience that they're getting from Wi-Fi and the network.
Okay.
So their server cloud that's overheating. So I put together proposals for all this, and I say, and this is the first time I'm doing more like network proposals and stuff like that. But I'm like, here's what your options are, and we put in my firewall option, and suddenly the firewall stops crashing. We put in more access points in spots that aren't the metal roof, and the Wi-Fi experience improved.
Who
They grow pretty rapidly. We moved to a new office, and I actually
nice?
helped with that build out in determining like where we're going to have Wi-Fi access points, where we're going to have computer drops, and how many. And they
Hmm.
cheap out a little bit on the help, and they kind of hired this group that primarily does AV kind of stuff, and they were paying
Okay.
them hourly. And this was like a bonus deal because they got the contract to do the boss's house, to do the
Mhm.
AV for his house, and they're just doing a
Okay.
favor by helping with
Yeah,
this network
yeah.
cabling at the office.
I'm familiar with that. That's happened.
So they were kind of hard to get scheduled. Like I'd be like, "Hey guys, when are you going to come out and finish up this project? Because we have like a moving date
Right, right.
approaching. The cabling has to go in, and we have these moving dates approaching." And we actually end up in a situation when a little bit of foresight before when I was talking about network cripping. I end up terminating over 100 runs, and me and the financial control and I end up like it
The
becomes like crunch.
controller?
Yeah,
That's fun.
he was a little I love Brian. He would have quotes like he wouldn't do something right, and he'd say, "Well, that's future Brian problems." It was kind of his like he was related to the owner, and he would do catch-all stuff, kind of like I like to do. Like there was something that needed to be done, even if it
Mhm.
wasn't in his job description, he was going to help do it. And so we were on a crunch, and so it's Brian and I at like 8 p.m. on a weekday, and we're running network cables, and we had a concrete masonry drill because they core drilled the concrete, and we're running network cables under the concrete.
Oof.
We're
Okay.
putting in anchor with eye hooks, and we're running them back to the network closet, and then we're crimping them. And during this process, he dislocates his shoulder.
Oh, no.
Because if you haven't used a masonry drill like this and you're going into the concrete, it can catch rebar
Yeah.
or other like supporting materials, and it will crank your shoulder.
Um, I,
And at first, he doesn't tell me what's going on. So he's just like in pain. I'm like, "What's going on, buddy? Did you like tap your arm against a vent or something?" And he doesn't tell me. He just like walks out of the room, and I'm like, "You okay?" And he like goes, and I don't know if he like apparently this has happened before to him. I don't know if he like
yeah,
slams his shoulder into the wall or something, but he pops it back in place and continues working.
God damn. What the?
We had a deadline. We had 100 drops to
Oh my
hook up.
God. Jeez. Okay, first off, if you're going to be drilling your concrete, especially poured concrete, you got to get an SDS drill and you got
Yep.
to use the
That's
divots that
we
have,
did have that. We had that
okay,
going for us.
and you have to use the carbide tip bits that are designed to go through rebar.
I don't know if we had that going for us.
Okay.
And
I,
we probably
the
should
last
have
time,
had respirator masks on, and we didn't, so we probably got like asbestos concrete or something that's going to
we're going to have
affect me.
silicosis. Is that how you say
Yeah, I
that?
think so.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just had like concrete dust in our nose. It was not great.
Anyways, enough of that twist.
And then I guess so we pull it off through the pure effort of the controller and I just getting
My
things
God,
done. We
talk about being a hero. I mean, control is like this. This is, I mean, they may as well be the CFO. Like, we're
yeah.
gonna have cost overruns. We can't afford them. We got to get this done.
The last quick bit on them is we end up setting up an event venue, and we hosted Nash Cocktail, which is kind of a networking event, and I would help kind of run the technology on those events for a little bit.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. Okay, so
Um,
a little bit of internal, a little bit of external. You're doing some fun stuff.
yeah,
Okay,
we
cool.
I think the statutory on this is out too, but the owner like was in a disagreement with our neighbor and made an agreement to give them internet off of the building. So we set up a point to
What?
point from our building to their building to resolve a disagreement. Yeah,
That's pretty
because
entertaining.
why not?
Yeah, why not? Sure.
But ultimately, I kind of grew restless. So we get through all that, and then we have this big move and stuff. And I'm knocking out IT issues, but there's not as much of the project work coming. And I start getting put into tasks that I'm not as thrilled about doing. And I'm still 21, so I don't do a good job at communicating that to my manager. And I kind of grow restless a little bit, and I believe I was on a performance improvement plan, and I made the decision that it was time to look for something else.
Gotcha. Okay.
And again, that's, I'm a younger guy. I could have handled things better looking back, but
We always can.
so I ended up interviewing at a few spots. Interviewed with a company that was based out of Atlanta and would have actually been a remote position, but they wanted me to drive to Atlanta on a pretty regular basis. And I didn't think that wasn't the best fit, but I went through some of the interview process. One of the people I work with at Roost now actually ended up working for him, and it sounds like I possibly dodged a bullet there. So maybe things worked out after all. But ultimately, the company that I was supporting as an IT manager, they determined that maybe they don't need a full-time IT person anymore, and I make a referral to my old MSP and kind of connect the two of those guys together. And like, hey, maybe this is a fit for everybody here. And in talks with them, the owner kind of said, we go for lunch, kind of talking this client over. He's like, funny enough, the person that we replaced you with is leaving our company. Do you want your spot back? And we'll pay you more than what you're making at this than you were making your IT role.
Look at that. Okay.
But yeah.
So
So I come back to the MSP that I was working with at a wage that was more of what I was looking for.
nice. Okay. Okay. So you're finally, and you're still, I mean, you're still in your early 20s.
Yeah, I don't think I might have turned 22. I may have not even turned 22.
Damn,
And
dude,
we're making a little bit of a job hop here.
and you're already you're 22, if that, and you've already gotten two former bosses to call you and be like, "Hey, I want you back."
Yeah.
That's pretty.
I feel
dope.
really fortunate. Not everybody gets that opportunity, and
Oh yeah.
it's not always things that they do. Sometimes you can show up and still not be recognized.
I mean, talk about. I'm thinking about it now. I'm like, think about like you from bringing the lonely kid in middle school to being the sought after employee that people want to be around, talk to, and work with. So hey, I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. So you very interesting that you've now gone back to your roots in the real world, right? As we want to call it.
Yeah.
How did that end up? Because you're not there today. So,
Yep.
and
So
I know, there's a lot of time between then and now.
it
And
is.
so I'm curious, how did your path continue to evolve at that MSP? What was the like what did your title become, or what was the like tasks you were
Yeah.
handling, and what set up the stage for you to go into and what I'm trying to get here is like you're working for Roost today, a
Yeah.
company that's all about making automation the easiest thing in the world.
Yeah.
So, what set up the foundation for you to become an automation expert?
Sure. So I'm probably going to fast around a little bit just to be respectful of everyone's time. I know, we're running a little bit long, but I'm going to kind of we're covering 7 years here, and we're going to fast around it a little bit. So I come back as a senior technology consultant. I continue to do good work and become a lead. And then I continue to do work and become eventually a CTO of the company and brought on
Oh,
to part of the leadership team.
nice.
During this, I kind of become what they would call a hat collector because I'm continuing to do what I would call picking up things that aren't getting done. So we would identify processes or positions that weren't being done, and I would start doing them. I did a little bit of technical sales. I did some of that lead work. I did some project work, just a little bit of everything along the way. I was also involved in our hiring process, which I loved doing. I found that really enjoyable, and it's one of the things that kind of led me to believe that I might like making this podcast. As my favorite part of the interview was learning everybody's story.
Cool. Okay. Okay. I mean, I think that's one thing that I've always enjoyed too, is like, I think it's one of the reasons why this episode's a little longer than we thought it might be. I think we both have a really big passion in just wanting to learn more about the people behind
Yeah.
things. And anyways, you're doing more and more. You've
Yeah.
dawned into a CTO. You're stepping into a leadership role, an executive role.
Yeah.
Was it a true real role? Was it one of those titles that doesn't mean so much? I think I had CTO on my resume at one point.
Yeah,
And
I'm
then
going
when
to
I
be
was looking
honest.
for
It,
the
it
next
was
job,
probably
I
a little
removed
bit.
it because it made no sense.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. It was probably a little bit of a bloated MSP title, if we're completely honest. I'm doing
Oh,
some of those things. I'm leading some of that direction, but it's probably a bloated title.
so you're both level 1, level 2, level 3, automation experts, sales, CTO, and you have to go get the snacks.
That was something that I would actually do. I would go to Sam's Club and pick up the office snacks
Yep.
during my lunch break. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Those Costco runs were my favorite days.
But I'm skipping one little bit that I'll show appreciation for. Before I get to CTO, one of the things that I do is I run across, I'm running across in my automations this little site called CyberDrain.
Oh, let's go, Kelvin.
Yeah, is this random Netherlands guy is posting all these cool PowerShell scripts that I'm getting a lot of value of, and
Yeah.
he comes out with this CTF that I'm aware of, and I miss the first one. By the time I saw it, it was over. I kind of bookmarked this and follow this, and I know I'm gonna do the next one. So I think the second one is the one that I'm involved with, and it fell on a week that I was on vacation already, which didn't thrill my wife, I don't think, but I spent some of my vacation hammering my head with this competition. Super high level. CTF is capture the flag. The cyber drain one is more sysadmin or MSP based. So you get to interact with issues that real MSPs have had and just learn more. And I got
which differs from most CTFs, which are cybersecurity based.
Yeah.
So it's rare to find ones that are general IT or sysadmin based.
Yeah. And I would get so much value out of these because some of it I already knew, but other aspects, one of the challenges was a SQL cluster. And I had never had to dealt with a SQL cluster before. And it was an issue where I'm going to use the wrong term here, but the database kind of corrupted because one of the cluster hosts went offline. And the idea of the challenge was to make you aware that that's a thing that could happen in part. But because I was able to complete that challenge, when we had a potential client come on board that had that issue, I was able to fix it from just practicing it in this safe environment.
So you're telling me that a CTF actually taught you a real world skill that you actually essentially do the exact same thing.
It's important to have safe places to learn. And as MSPs and IT companies, we don't always get our employees safe places to learn. And the CyberDrain CTF is one of those places that you can learn safely.
100%. I'm annoyed that I missed the everyone that he's run, and I want to do one next time he does it.
My career would not be where it is today if it weren't for the CyberDrain CTF. It's one of the most frustrating experiences you'll ever go through, and it'll be one of the most rewarding things that you can do.
Anything designed by Kelvin.
He can be a bit sadistic at times too. Like he thrives on the suffering of the contestants, but I was fortunate in the 4 that I competed with to place top 5 in the 4 that I competed with.
Nice.
I mean, frankly, I leveraged that with my existing MSP at times as I would get that CTO title, as a way of like, look, I'm participating in community and I'm really putting myself out there and trying to better myself.
That's awesome, dude. So, you and I we could talk about this all day. I absolutely love. I've participated in a number of CTFs, and some cool things out there. But it's how did participating in the CTF, starting to collect those hats, starting to do like not only are you taking on more role and responsibilities, your role is expanding, you have more responsibilities. You're starting to realize that you have a really strong technical acumen. You're getting better at fixing computers, resolving network issues. And not just that, but extrapolating information from a business need into what the true problem is from a technical perspective, or translating technical into business.
Mm-hmm.
And you're working at a pretty decently sized MSP. How is that starting to shape what you're dealing with and who you're working with? And you guys are getting bigger clients or, more sensitive clients. You're dealing with industries that might be complicated in nature and they're almost one-offs, there's some stuff out there, and I'm curious what you guys saw or what you ended up dealing with.
Yep. So one thing that I'll kind of tie a bow on the Cyberdrain CTF, some of the outcomes of the CTF is Kelvin forced me to learn APIs, which was something that I was not looking at all. And while I was at my MSP, I got to build out automations and different automation platforms related to APIs. Now that I knew them, we started offering projects to clients like, okay, I can make these two things talk to each other. And so I was able to bring in additional project income that the MSP wouldn't have otherwise. Then we get to today. And because I took on those API projects, because I participated in the Cyberdrain CTF and learned APIs, I saw a job opening at Roost, which was this company that I had been watching for a while. And they were looking for a rock team member, and I applied to that. And I was very fortunate enough to be hired.
Dude, that is, it's crazy how you started your career at an MSP. You did a bunch of stuff. You did things that made no sense. You did things that failed. You left the MSP. You came back to the MSP. You're still in the managed services market. You're still doing outsourced IT. And then on a whim almost, it feels like you see the job, you apply for the job, you get the job, and you are now working for, one of the top vendors in the MSP space. And that's, I mean, you went to the dark side. Sorry.
I did. And there's a little bit in between there because I couldn't decide if I wanted to work for a vendor. And I saw this crab guy on LinkedIn whose name was Dean. And I'd seen some of his stuff on Reddit, and then he starts popping up my YouTube feed and teaching me how an MSP business actually works. And so I was taking that information and it was driving some of those sales conversations I was having, some of the conversations that I was having with the MSP owners. And I really, if I stayed there, I wanted to be more involved in some of those financial conversations and provide input and value. And that wasn't something that they, I think, were ready for, and that's okay too. They don't owe me anything. They treated me really well, but I kind of built this relationship through commenting on this crab guy's channel, and I DM'd it. I'm like, Dean, you said this term. What does this term mean? And that's how our conversation started. And he's been kind enough to check on me, and I still like to follow his videos and stuff. But when I was considering the decision, I was like, Dean, because he's a guy who is kind enough to tell you the truth. That's not something that you always get, is someone who's kind enough to tell you the truth. It may not be the truth that you want, but he'll tell you his honest opinion.
I will say, as brash as Dean can be, he is by far one of the most honest, straightforward, no bullshit people in the industry. Like, I mean, the guy, he has done so much. I can't wait to talk to him and be like, you need to be on this show. Like, we want to hear your story, because I still don't understand how he did what he did.
Yeah, we'll have to find that out. But I'm talking to him and I'm like, Dean, what do I need to know about being a vendor? He's like, first off, when you move over to the vendor industry and you go to conferences, you're vendor trash, and none of the other vendors will want to give you free t-shirts anymore.
That's not true. You all trade all the time.
And, he told me some other things that were really valuable. I kept it vague. I don't know if I thought he was going to tell my boss or something and I was going to be had that I was looking at another job, but I kept it vague, and I was just like, what should I know? And he gave me some very honest feedback, and with that feedback and just some other thoughts, I talked it over with my wife, who's, always obviously been a big aspect into all of this along the way as well. And, I made the decision to go to the dark side.
Hey, that's a big change. I'd say it's probably a little bit less stressful too, right? Not dealing with client facing necessarily. There's still stress, but a different kind of stress.
You work your brain in different ways.
Yeah.
Roost is kind of a unique situation. I think there's vendors where perhaps that could be true. With Roost, we interact with MSPs, which in themselves deal with a diverse range of products. And we're helping them automate their diverse range of products, and nobody has the same stack. And some people have the same stack, but they don't at the same time. So when you talk about breadth at an MSP, when you're working at Roost in the supports position, you really have to have breadth, because you're dealing with whatever software, and you have to really put your critical thinking cap on and to work through these issues because they're kind of all over the place. We support so many integrations. We have custom integrations. So if we don't have an integration, you can integrate whatever you like that has an API for the most part.
That's, as someone that's trying to do some basic automation, I don't have enough need where Roost might be useful for my company yet. But having seen what you guys do and have the number of integrations you have built in, my God, is it complicated? Even the stuff that's not complicated, companies change their APIs like on a
Yeah.
whim. It's just like, we're gonna change the name of this variable. Why?
Yeah.
Why does it need to change?
And that's some of the value of Roost is having a group of MSPs that are doing the same things, and we're taking care of some of those changes for you. There's nothing against the MSPs that want to use Power Automate, Innovate. There's room for more than one tool in the market to do the right job, but you gain a lot of value by some of the work that we're doing for you and just some of the flexibility.
I will say I've worked with a few automation companies out there. There's one really popular one. I'm not going to name drop, but if you are doing anything custom at all, they're like, we don't know. We're not.
Yeah.
Because it's custom, we don't know. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? I need the logs. Like, I just need you to help me figure out because I'm blind to the issue. And yet when working with you guys, you're like, okay, well, let's get technical. Let's figure this out. Let's solve the problem.
It's a choose your own adventure.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the golden days of lab tech where it's this open world where you can build whatever you need to build.
So that really piques my interest there. Are there any cool things you've done at Roost so far that you're allowed to say that
we're working on Skynet. We're not quite there yet. But so when I came in, I continued my tradition of trying to pick up some things that maybe weren't where they should have. So the first thing that I started doing was documenting, and they did have documentation, but I brought in even more documentation. And every time I would ask a question, I tried to not ask it twice. I would create a document in our internal KB whenever I asked a question. I made sure that it was somewhere. And so I kind of improved some of our internal documentation. I was able to bring in some of my MSP experience. We have a wide range of really sharp guys, and some of them have developer backgrounds even on our support team. We have a diverse set. Yeah.
That's cool. So, I mean, not only do you have to fix the problems, but you actually know how to.
Yeah.
And almost every aspect of the pipeline there. That's super cool.
There's been situations where even I have given a vendor advice on how to improve something, which, I mean, 5 years ago, I didn't know much, but now looking at more APIs, like, hey, it would be better if you did this.
Right. Cool.
And then keeping along those lines, I kind of latched on to some things that maybe, not everyone was adopting, that there were still earlier things. So one of those things was App Builder. And I've kind of worked to skill up the team, but early on it was an alpha product that, was still early and not everyone was trained up on it. And so I grabbed that and, kind of went after it and learned how it worked. My first project was I made a MySpace page, like recreated my one from back in the day in it. And then I've just kind of learned more about that and trained up people. And I've had a lot of great conversations with Roost customers and kind of being in some cases their first touch point on App Builder and learning it, which has been very rewarding when people come back and they've built cool things.
That's super cool because you wet their tongue and then, or no, that's not the phrase. They wet their beak and then they learn so much after that. They go with full forward and I love it when you do the smallest things. They seem like the smallest things, and then all of a sudden that person just takes it and runs with it. Super cool to see.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I'm giving them in some cases these intro calls and they really run with them and make these amazing sites. It always impresses me when I see them a month later presenting on the open mic and like, oh, they made that. That's so cool to see. And that kind of brings me to this other bit. The other bit that I latched on was custom integrations, because I was thinking how powerful it is to be able to integrate with all these solutions that maybe we don't have an integration for, but the MSP still use it and has an API. Right. And so sometimes vendors don't have the best API documentation. And so I kind of learned I kind of learned the quirks around what some of those issues were in their schemas. And I built a tool for myself at first, maybe a little bit selfishly, called Schema Doctor, and it would fix these common issues. And I would start fixing these schemas that the clients would come to me with. It's like, hey, this schema's not working right. And I'd put it in and it would come back and it would work. And so then I shared it with the internal team, and they start using, the other Rock members and other members of Roost. And they're like, this is pretty nice, actually. Like, this fixes a lot of the issues.
It's amazing how simple. You automated your automation. Wow.
It's had a huge impact. I've iterated on it. I released on LinkedIn. I get surprising, it's kind of funny. It's grown to the point where I hear about people discussing Schema Doctor, and they're people that I've never mentioned it to. So it gets passed around the community as this tool to help out, which is really rewarding, actually.
That's awesome, dude. You're doing so much to further the efficiencies of technicians and MSPs in general, right?
Yeah.
It is such a cool thing to see how not only are you affecting your clients and your customers, how you're trying to improve the processes internally so everybody can improve and do a better job. You show so much value, and you keep showing value and giving back. It's really awesome to hear your story and see how you've done so much with so many changes and twists.
Times. Yeah. I guess at a high level, though, I mean, that's my story.
Yeah, dude,
these days, I'm about to release a new version of Schema Doctor that's going to be a little bit better still. You'll see me on the open mics now and then for Roost. I'm working on a training class that's kind of in progress about basic scripting for people that are just starting out in the industry.
Okay.
And you'll find me here on this podcast, too, in the coming weeks.
Nice. It's crazy how when you start to educate, you start to give back, you start to do more of the uplifting, and you just can't stop.
Yeah.
I think one of the coolest things about it is that you start to learn more about yourself. You start to get better at figuring out how to do things more efficiently. One thing that was a problem for me during COVID is that I stopped talking to people because I wasn't in the office anymore.
Yeah.
And it made it harder for me to verbalize my thoughts. I started to lose the ability to speak fluently or cohesively. And even now, I'm still struggling every now and then to put together a train of thought that makes sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't help that we're recording this a little late at night, but hey. But Ben, I mean, this absolutely amazing to hear your story, learn more about you. I'm so happy that you and I are friends and that we get to do this together. And I can't wait for the next thing you do, whatever the next Schema Doctor is going to be, and continue doing this podcast with you, man.
The pleasure is all mine. I'm really grateful to know you as well, and I'm grateful to be a part of this podcast. I think I'm hopeful that we'll be able to impact some people with this, even if it's just one person. That's enough.
Reach out to us. Feel free to reach out to us on our website, on LinkedIn, connect with us. We're open, and we want to help uplift you in your career. But this is literally the thing that we wish we had when we started out, and just being able to give back to you is going to make it so that way the industry just keeps getting better and better no matter what.
Yeah. Thank you so much, man. Thank you, everyone, for listening to us ramble through this. We'll see everyone next week.
Take care.